I'm willing to wager that most of you have heard, or even used at some point, the phrase, seeing is believing. We rely so much on our five senses, especially our sight, if you're lucky to have your sight, of course. For most of us, our eyesight shapes our view of the world, pun intended, which is also true of our other senses, of course, especially if you hold to the aforementioned maxim. For most of us, what we think we see, touch, taste, or smell is all the proof we need for the solidity of the universe. However, in this age of science, we should know better. But we are so programmed by the so-called external world, we become myopic. Our perspective is constricted to a very narrow understanding of reality, which is reflected, of course, by what we can see, touch, smell, and so on. Namely, a minute part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the entire range of what we know exists of the radiation field which travels out and spreads like waves. My friends, what I am saying is we are virtually blind. Now, to understand this, we need to grasp how the electromagnetic spectrum is split, which is based on the wavelength or frequency of the waves themselves, and includes a wide variety of types of radiation, such as radio waves, which is the longest wavelength and is used for communication. Microwaves are used in cooking and radar. Infrared radiation is perceived as heat. Visible light, well, that's the portion of the spectrum our eyes can see. Ultraviolet light can cause sunburn and is used in sunbeds. X-rays are used in medical imaging. And finally, gamma rays are the shortest wavelength of all and is high-energy radiation. Within that electromagnetic range, we can only see the visible light portion. Now, the clue is in the word visible, if you didn't know. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. This portion that the human eye can detect is minute compared to the size of the electromagnetic field itself. This spectrum covers an enormous range of wavelengths, from the very long, for example, radio waves can measure up to kilometers in length, to the incredibly short. Gamma rays are smaller than a single atom, often less than 0.01 nanometers. So the visible light range at just 400 to 700 nanometers is a tiny fraction of the whole. Now, if we consider the full scale of the electromagnetic field, the visible portion is less than, get this, 0.0035%. That's how much we can see of the entirety. Now, try and get your head around that. This means that much of this radiation is invisible to the human eye, but it can be detected and utilized with specialized instruments, of course. Now, this is one way we know these frequencies exist, because we use them, even though we can't see them. We take all this for granted, but rarely do we apply this knowledge to our restricted perceptions. And this restriction of our consciousness is not helped by the fact that we are also constricted by the various perceptual filters or lenses we wear. We might see the world through a science filter or a religious filter, a political right-wing or left-wing filter, and so on. You get my point. And these lenses will be of various thicknesses or strengths of belief, all of which can distort our view. Now, some might rightly argue that their lens sharpens their vision, depending on the filter, of course. But there are many distortions out there. Do you see what I'm doing by saying that? Out there? Out where? Is there an out there? Which brings me to the illusion of separation, that the outside world, including other beings, are separate from us, that we are isolated from each other and the universe. Now, whereas many believe, and I'm one of them, that everything is interconnected and part of a larger whole, This is what we have forgotten through the mind wipe we experience after every incarnation. This illusion of separation is the root cause of many of our problems, such as fear, anger, and suffering. The very things that the archons and matrix need to sustain the system. It needs our louche, a term coined by out-of-body experiencer Robert Monroe, to describe the energy produced through pain and suffering. To keep us in this prison, our true nature must be hidden from us, hence the need for the continual memory wipe. Welcome to the real world. I'm the Grumpy Grandpa. I once heard David Icke say, or I may have read it somewhere, I can't quite remember, that the world can only be understood by knowing how it was created, by whom, and to what end. I think that perfectly sums up our conundrum. It's only when we understand what the world is, how it works, and its ultimate purpose will it make any kind of sense. When we realize this fact, everything changes. Understanding the extreme limitations of our senses is fundamental to how we comprehend this world as a prison. Those who fall for the fiction of seeing is believing, let's call them normies for now, are trapped in a prison of perception. And this is huge because, as I have said before, everything depends on perception. And this is why we are so easily manipulated. Because of this perceptual restriction of our handlers, or the archons for want of a better word, they can stage manage us, so we are easily herded and controlled. Exactly. Now, there is a classic parable concerning 6 blind men and an elephant, which perfectly illustrates the limitations of perception and the importance of always considering multiple perspectives. In this story, 6 blind men encounter an elephant for the first time. Each man touches a different part of the elephant and forms an opinion based on their limited experience. The first man touches the elephant's side and declares that it is like a wall. The second man feels the trunk and believes the elephant to be like a snake. The third man grabs the tusk and insists the elephant is like a spear. The fourth man touches the leg and thinks the elephant is like a tree trunk. The fifth man feels the ear and imagines the elephant to be like a fan. Finally, the sixth man holds the tail and concludes the elephant is like a rope. Now, when the men share their conclusions, they argue and fail to agree on the elephant's true nature, because each man's limited perspective prevents them from understanding the whole picture. Now, this parable teaches us that truth is often multifaceted and requires multiple perspectives to fully grasp a concept or idea. Our individual life experiences can shape our understanding of the world, but they may not always reflect the complete reality. So it's important to listen to and respect different viewpoints, even if they differ from our own, at least to a certain extent, because by acknowledging the limitations of our own perceptions and seeking out diverse perspectives, we can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the world around us, and maybe we'll be less likely to fall for the deception of the handlers. Now, I'm picking up new details of our possible reality all the time from listening to different points of view. Now, let me give you a perfect example of this kind of perception deception, as David Icke likes to call it. 4 years ago, different governments around the world, including the various states here in the US, gave themselves wholesale emergency powers and locked down their citizens. Minnesota was one of them and went to extremes with the various mandates. After all, we do have Tampon Tim as governor of Minnesota. You know, the weirdo who put tampons in boys' bathrooms in schools. Mandates were issued, such as the wearing of masks, which did nothing to stop the virus because the weave was just too big. Have you ever wondered why you never see scientists who work in virology labs wear the flimsy masks we were made to wear? There is a good reason for that. They don't prevent viruses spreading through the cloth. Then there was social distancing, keeping 6 feet apart, which was totally arbitrary, to mandating an untested vaccine. Once again, my body, my choice, did not matter. How were the elites able to do this? Well, through mass hysteria propagated by the criminal media and the liberal hive mind. They were able to convince a large enough number of people that it was a good idea to impose these ridiculous restrictions that did absolutely nothing to prevent the spread. The real reason for the mandating of mask wearing was to see just how far the moo cows could be pushed. Very far, it turned out. Some are still wearing masks today. It's been termed the new normal. If you did not fall for this BS and did not comply, you were demonized and given all sorts of hostile labels. Now, I remember Arnie Schwarzenegger reprimanding us on these things. Do you recall this tantrum?
I think people should know there is a virus here. It kills people. And the only way we prevent it is to get vaccinated, to wear masks, to do social distancing, washing your hands all the time, and not just to think about, well, my freedom is being kind of disturbed here. No, screw your freedom.
Yeah, well, screw your movies, Arnold. They have been terminated.
You're terminated, fucker.
Ooh. Bye-bye. Many people's perception was manipulated and altered to suit the narrative. Those whom these parasites couldn't manipulate were targeted. And we haven't seen the end of this kind of manipulation and fear-mongering either. From the same state as Arnie, and therefore the same mindset, California Governor Gruesome Newsom is at it again. Who would have guessed? Look, all this nonsense we see around us can be simply explained. If you elect clowns, you're going to get a circus. Governor Newsom has just granted himself and his government a whole new slew of emergency powers. All this happening coincidentally a few weeks prior to Trump's inauguration. Just like clockwork. Do you remember the last time? So what's the concern?
Here's the reason why we need to care about this stuff, Nicole, is that we have some big picture stuff coming down the pike starting on January 21st. Mr. Bloomberg mentioned H5N1. That I'm really worried about. It's all over wild birds on the western part of the United States and going up in the north. It's getting into the poultry. We're seeing sporadic human cases, no human-to-human transmission yet, but that could happen. It's in the cattle, it's in the milk, and that's just the beginning. We have another major coronavirus likely brewing in Asia. We've had SARS in 2002, SARS-2, COVID-19 in 2019.
So why is Gruesome Newsom doing this? Well, because one, let me repeat that, one new severe case of bird flu, H5N1. And this one severe case isn't even in California. It's hundreds of miles away in Louisiana. Now, I'm not blaming Mr. Gruesome for his extreme actions. He is what he is, an extreme left-wing maniac. I'm blaming the moo cows who continue to vote for him and his rabble, the scaredy cats who are afraid of their own shadows. But remember, you get what you vote for. Vote for Gruesome Newsom, and you will get more lockdowns, more social distancing, and more useless mask wearing. Do you see how easily we can be played? California is once again relying on a tried and tested method of control. Fear. The formula for control is very simple when you break it down. Control perception and you control behavior. If you want to control the world, do this on a global scale. The rulers of this simulation have known this since the beginning, and since then have honed their skills to a level of precision which is awe-inspiring. It comes to something when populations begin to wonder if their particular countries can survive their various leaders' insane policies. Take the US these past 4 years, Canada with Trudeau, the UK with Starmer, and the various other European countries. The populace, they're all wondering, how are we going to survive this insanity? Once we understand this, we begin to see the way out of this perceptual prison. David Icke once wrote, "Perception is the fountain from which everything can be explained." Just remember how it worked with COVID. See the world from that perspective. And again, perspective is fundamental. And gradually you will be able to see the big picture. In many ways, the cabal shot themselves in the foot with the extent to which they used authoritarian methods during the COVID pandemic, because it was a slap in the face to many who were sleeping. They have now woken up. Their perceptions have changed, contrary to the established narrative. There are many levels to reality, many angles or points of view, and therefore numerous perceptions. This is why we see things differently. What we must not forget is that, like everything, the realm of visible light is also illusory, just like the matter that appears to construct the universe. Quantum physics has shown us this. So, if it is true that physicality is an illusion, why do we bump into things? I do it all the time. Why am I appearing to be sitting in a chair and not floating in space? Why can't we walk through walls? Clearly there is resistance. But what is this opposition preventing a transition through these objects? Well, firstly, it's not physical resistance. It's electromagnetic frequency resistance to differently charged frequencies. There is a repelling taking place here. All this is decoded through the senses or brain, of course. Therefore, what appears to be physical resistance is nothing more than opposition between different waveforms, decoded into solidity, and we become immersed in this reality through this illusion of sturdiness or matter. We are tricked into believing that this existence is solid and substantial, when it is nothing of the sort. Add physical pain to this scenario, solidity becomes so obvious you must be cuckoo to believe otherwise. However, let me relate a personal story. Through a bad dental experience, I developed trigeminal nerve damage, a pain which I had never experienced before in my life, and I've had kidney stones. The inexperienced dentist had hit my trigeminal nerve, which comes down the side of the face, not once, but twice with a needle, both times sending white hot pain up the side of my face. Long story short, for many years I had to suffer this mind-blowing pain. After several years had passed, taking main pain meds and seeing a pain management specialist, I began to wonder what would happen if I closed my eyes and placed my attention on the pain, become the observer and not the experiencer. Now, I don't know where this thought came from. This was prior to my starting meditation, and I hadn't heard of this practice from anyone else. But what I found was amazing. If the pain wasn't extreme, the method never worked in those situations. I found that just observing the pain or the sensation and decoupling from the I that was experiencing the pain lessened it significantly. And in some instances, the pain disappeared altogether. But I repeat, if the pain was overwhelming, I just had to give up. It didn't work. I imagine it needed infinitely more practice to overcome that level of pain. Now, after several months of doing this, gradually the pain lessened and finally just disappeared. And it was such a slow process. Initially, I hadn't realized that the pain had vanished, though I was aware that it was occurring less often. It was while I was at work walking in a corridor one day when the reality hit that I hadn't had pain in a while. I had been told by the medical establishment that I would have to live with this condition. They even wanted me to undergo a procedure where my trigeminal nerve would be severed, leaving the one side of my face numb. It has been about 6 years, maybe more, since I had this pain. I have been pain-free all this time. Now, I believe that without knowing, I changed the programming somehow. So is pain an illusion? Or is this mere coincidence? We need to change how we perceive the world. Again, I ask the question, what if this physical world that we see, that we experience with our senses, as all-encompassing as it is to our daily lives, what if it is not the true reality? What's beneath that sensory illusion? Why do we experience the world in this way? What is lurking behind it? Are there other beings, other consciousnesses? Are there archons who are nothing more than energy vampires? Are they real? What if we were able to see the world as it truly is? Would we survive the experience, or would we be completely overwhelmed? Much of it might be redundant information that we don't need. That's irrelevant to our survival and well-being, and therefore is filtered out. You see, when playing a computer game, you don't need to know how the game is rendered. That's superfluous to the experience. But wouldn't it be helpful to know, contrary to mainstream physicalism, that we are in an illusion? Wouldn't that help to overcome the pain and the suffering that we are constantly bombarded with? Wouldn't it be a way out of the prison? Does what I'm arguing for sound crazy to you? Check this out.
Are we all living in a computer simulation created by super intelligent beings? A Swedish philosopher proposed that very idea back in 2003, but now a new theory is taking things one crazier step further, suggesting that we are living in a simulation made of pure thought, as in we aren't living in a supercomputer, but rather everything you do and see and taste, everything, it's just information in an idea. In other words, you aren't physically real, nothing else is either. Is your mind blown yet? Kennedy recently discussed this theory with best-selling author, professor, and theoretical physicist Dr. Michio Kaku. Check it out.
So tell me about the idea of immaterialism manifesting as our universe.
Well, we've all seen the movie The Matrix, and then you begin to wonder, computer games are getting so realistic that maybe these avatars are real, and maybe we are avatars. Maybe we are nothing but cosmic digitized figures dancing on somebody's computer screen. And then to take it one step even farther than that, let's say that this person who hits the play button, starting this video game, has a dream. And we are the dream. And so cosmic consciousness then determines the existence of reality itself. And so that gives an entirely new meaning to the question of, is reality just a dream, a figment of somebody's subconscious dreaming? Well, believe it or not, quantum physicists are looking at some of these ideas rather carefully.
Not so crazy after all, maybe. Coming back to the present. We have seen how the human relation to truth is shaky at best. Authoritarianism is the name of the game these days. We continue to vote into power narcissists or people with low IQs, reflected by the insane policies enacted by them. However, we are living through a moment unlike any other in modern times, at least by my estimation. Institutions are collapsing. Trust in leadership is at an all-time low, and narratives that once held people's rapt attention are all falling apart. People are finally waking up to other possibilities, and the cabal seems incapable of putting the genie back into the bottle. At least that's my opinion. Are we beginning to see a pattern break, as Art Cakes describes escaping the programming? People are beginning to see that almost all communication by the media is some form of propaganda for the purpose of control. And the peasants are revolting.
Oh.
Not that kind of revolting, idiot. It's easy to see how many people can fall for the lies of the state when you consider the lifelong programming to self-identify and view reality solely through the lens of the five senses. Whether the programming is from family members, friends, or the education system, we are told to identify the I with various labels, such as I'm human, a man, I'm a woman, I'm trans, I'm this or that sexuality, non-binary, by race, religion, nationality, and the size of your bank account. But none of these identities define our essence. They only define what we are experiencing, and this during a very brief lifetime within the simulation. The true self is consciousness having these experiences, the infinite, the all there is. Imagine how things would change if the population knew this. Imagine the chaos the handlers would have on their hands if we all remembered who we are. Now they know this, and it terrifies them. Hence the onward push towards totalitarianism and therefore perception control. The whole conspiracy to enslave humanity is dependent on keeping us ignorant, trapped within a strictly limited and powerless label. What we must do is to liberate ourselves from these fake IDs, those phantom selves, as David Icke would call them. These identities are nothing more than illusions created by the five senses. It is these five senses which are the influencers of what is real and what is not. This illusion, of course, is propped up by the legacy media and its propagandist agenda. If there is one fact I would like us all to understand at the close of this episode, it's that the realm of the five sense frequency range is so dramatically different from our expanded consciousness, which is beyond any prison of the mind trap. Were we to understand this fact, the prison would be no more. Until the next time.